Welcome to the Bitcamp podcast, our classic yearly professor edition. I'm Ben from the Bitcamp marketing team.
I'm Amber from the Bitcamp marketing team.
And today we have Justin. He's a principal lecturer here at the math department. He's been teaching math and computer science here for 23 years, widely regarded as one of the best professors here for CS and math. Some would say they're GOAT. I don't know if he wants, he probably doesn't believe that, but it is true. And so thank you for coming here. Do you want to introduce yourself a little bit?
Yeah, again, my name is Justin Wyss-Gallifent. I'm actually this semester, this year I'm officially full-time CS faculty.
Oh, wow.
So I have departed the math department. And in fact, the fall semester was the last course I ever will teach in math.
Oh, wow.
Unless something drastically changes. Yeah. But yeah, no, I've been here for, I've been at the university for almost 30 years. Yeah.
Wow.
Including grad school. Yeah.
Yeah, so this first question might be a little bit based on that.
No, go for it.
But when did you first fall in love with math?
So what's funny, right? So I'm not sure that I did. So funny story. It was like about 2 years ago. My mother was digging out old report cards for when we were in school, and I looked at some of my math grades in junior high school, and some of them were C's, and even like early high school, some of them were C's. So like, and I liked math, but I wasn't really really kicking butt in math. And it was more that like I started undergraduate actually as an engineering major, and then I did that for 2 years, and I didn't really like it. And so I didn't know what to switch to, and I was like, well, math is fun. So I switched to math. So it's funny. I like the idea of studying something that I didn't need to like have possessions for. Like there was something like really, really nice and academic about that. I could just study. And one of my undergraduate advisors used to joke that he would be like sitting home in the bathtub and just like staring at the ceiling and doing math. And I was like, that's really appealing. I like that. So I got a degree in math, and then I pursued a PhD in math because I didn't want to get a job. That's the long and short of it. And so really what happened is when I look back at it, I feel like I fell in love with teaching more than falling in love with math. Like I love math, don't get me wrong, but it's more that like I love the process of teaching. And if somebody said to me, well, you can never teach math or computer science again, instead you have to teach English, I'd be like, okay, I'll figure it out, and then I'll teach it, and that'll be the fun. Yeah.
Was there someone like growing up, like a teacher or mentor that like made you kind of realize you love teaching, or like kind of pushed you that way? Or
it runs in my family a bit. My mother was a teacher, and so and my older brother's a teacher, and so I sort of grew up with this mentality of like, this is like a thing, this is something you can do. So it always seemed kind of fun, and it always didn't. I mean, it still doesn't actually feel like a job. Right, like it's when I describe my job to people, I'm like, okay, this is what I do. I come in and I tell things that I know to people that I like, because my students are great, and I'm like, and then they pay me for it, and then I ask my students, I'm like, look, think about something you know really well, and imagine that somebody paid you a relatively good amount of money to just explain it to other people, and they're all like, oh yeah, that sounds pretty good. Yeah, and then I had a number of good math teachers. I know that there are a lot of bad math teachers in the world, and I was lucky enough to not get any of those.
And then going into like the possessions thing, like you were talking about,
Yeah.
Do you think that had an influence on you kind of gravitating towards CS? I know you've said you used to build things as a kid and like learn programming from a younger age.
Yeah, I mean CS also, I'm not sure what struck me about computer science, about why I like that so much. I think that's computer science I liked because I felt like it was there's a control thing, right? Like you get to do something and you get to like make something happen. And I found that really appealing. And I remember the first time I saw a computer and put my hands on a computer, I was like, oh, this sounds kind of weird actually, but I was like, this thing will do whatever I tell it, you know? But I was like, this is really appealing. And still to this day, like I told people before, there are very few things I can do at 3 o'clock in the morning. I can sleep and I can code, right? It doesn't matter how tired I am. I can sit in front of a machine and I can code. And there's something sort of fun about that. And that still to this day is the case.
So what was our first ever like teaching experience?
So actually, it's funny now that I mentioned that. I think about what it was, and it was that I helped at a summer camp when I was 14.
Oh.
It was a science and rocketry summer camp, and it was at a private school, and I was just sort of helping out. The guy who was teaching it was a sort of well-known person in the area that I lived in. And so we were just helping him. My older brother and I were just helping him out. And it was just a blast, right? I just remember feeling like this is really fun, just sort of goofing around with the students. And then, around the same time, I was working in a daycare, which doesn't feel like teaching, but that has that same feel to it. And so then it sort of built up from there. When I was an undergraduate, I was tutoring. And I remember distinctly being like, oh, this is neat. This is fun. I go to this room and people come in and ask me math questions. And I know the answers. And I get to talk about them. That's cool.
So you said summer camp. Would you mind talking about where you grew up and clearly you have an accent. I'm pretty sure a lot of people are curious about that.
I know, right? So the number one guess I get is Australian, but it's not, and I've never been to Australia in my life. So the long story short is I was born in Switzerland. I lived there for 2 years, and then we moved to England, and I lived there for 8 years, and then the States. So let's be clear, I've been here most of my life, right? So when people say oh, are you English? I'm like, I've been in America for 43 years, so yeah, I'm American more than anything. And so whenever I tell most of these sort of anecdotes, like summer camp, these are all US.
So would you say your accent's a mix of Swiss and British,
yeah,
kind of?
Yeah, well, I feel like it's it's somewhere between American and English. When I go back, I go back to England every year, and when I go back to England, they tell me I sound American. Without fail, they're like, no, you have an American accent. It doesn't even cross their mind that it's anything else. And then when I come here, everybody's like, I don't really know. But I have been told by people that they can hear a little bit of German or Swiss in there somehow. I don't know what, I can't hear it myself.
So now that you've been teaching for 30 years, what's something that no one tells you about a professor beforehand? Something that you had to learn yourself?
This sounds really bad, but I feel like it's not something that can easily be taught.
Definitely.
And I think that I've discovered that sort of progressively through the years, especially interacting. Here's the thing, is over the years I've interacted with a lot of people who were trying to become good teachers, and they were pursuing it by getting degrees, for example, in education. And full respect to people who are getting degrees in education, I don't think it necessarily correlates to being a good teacher. I think that's the long and short of it. I think that and my mother used to believe this. My mother used to be like, if you're a good teacher, she used to believe that good teachers were born and not made. And I don't think I necessarily agree with that. I think that there are certain things you can do to become a better teacher. But a lot of it feels really intuitive and connecting with people and understanding things. And so I think that there's an aspect of that. I also there's a little bit of, I don't know if this is related to what you're saying, but I always felt like when I was younger, that you look up to teachers and you're like, wow, they know so much, and they and they're so smart, and they must be living in this world of knowledge. And then you get there and you're like, I don't really know anything, and every time you go to teach something, for me at least, I'm trying to work it out again, because I'm like, how the hell does this work? I don't know. So that too, yeah, the idea that it's not this, it was not like I reached this place where I'm like, now I'm a good teacher. Every single time I teach, it feels like a bit of a struggle. Of is this going to work out, right? Are the students going to like me? I still panic every time I read my teaching reviews, right? Even though invariably they're good, I still, there's always a bit of me that's nervous. What if this all falls apart?
So what's your favorite thing about being a teacher then? Kind of on the opposite side of things?
There's a part of me that loves attention, and that's just, I should just say it. And so walking into a room with 300 and something people and knowing that they're listening to me, there's an appeal to that. I honestly really like that. And then being able to contribute something to them is equivalently good, right? I think I would also, I'm not sure I could do this, but I think I would also enjoy being an actor for the same reason. And stand-up comedy, for example, that sort of spontaneous, get up there and do something. And so that's great. But connected to the vacation is also I have a very short attention span, in the sense that if you told me I had to work on a 5-year project, I'd be like, no, no, I can't focus for 5 years. But when you tell me okay, you're gonna kick butt for 15 weeks, and then you get to disconnect completely, that appeals to my psychological sense. I'm like, I can do that. And then when summer comes, then I'm on holiday and I'm like, thank God I'm done. And then about 4 weeks in, I'm like, I miss teaching. I want to go back to, and I long to go back. So the schedule works
really
extremely, it works so well for me. Yeah.
Being a professor, it just seems it comes naturally to you, and it just works out for you.
It does. I got very lucky, I think, in that regard, right? I think a lot of people end up in dead-end jobs for whatever reason they do. And I know people in not dead-end jobs, but jobs they don't particularly like. And I feel a lot of sympathy for them. I'm like, you kind of wish you could get out, especially people I'm close to. And I'm like, I know you, and I could see what kind of position you'd be happier in. but the older we get, the harder it is to make those those changes. And so I'm sort of like, well, at least for me, thank goodness. And I'm like, whew, dodged a bullet there. Could have ended up like in software development at like Google, and that just sounds terrible.
Yeah, I guess like one thing I was gonna ask you about being a professor specifically, and like you were saying, kind of going through the things yourself over again to like relearn things. You know, many of us like CS and math students like love your notes and like refer them a lot, even when our classes have their own notes and stuff.
Yeah.
So I was just gonna ask you, like, what do you think like makes a good set of notes? How do you look at like the problem of choosing like the most important information to highlight? You know, balancing like detail and depth with like simplicity and conciseness, and
also organization, because your notes are very organized.
This might be what makes other people think I'm a good teacher. I'm going to try and tread carefully there, because I never want to say that I'm a good teacher. So I never think about a lot of those things specifically. I never go in and I never like make a checklist of like, is this detailed enough? Do I have enough of this? And so what actually is the truth, and this might sound a little weird, is I don't think I'm that smart. Like, that's the honest truth. And I think that whenever I go to teach something, I struggle with this process of like, okay, how do I break this down so I can understand it? So whenever I'm writing notes, I'm writing them for the students, but I kind of want to write them. So like, I don't know, pick a set of notes, like introduction to algorithm notes, right? So when I wrote those notes, it's because I had to teach this class. I knew about half the stuff. I didn't know about half the stuff. And I was like, shit, I got to learn this. And so I'm like looking at other resources and studying things, etc. And most of the things I find, to be honest, when I look for resources are terrible, right? And so whenever I'm reading other resources, I'm sort of like I don't understand this at all. And so I write the notes to some degree, because I'm like, oh, when I finish writing the notes, I'm like, now I understand it. And that seems to correlate very well to the students understanding it. You know,
so everyone's like learning at the same time. Like, we're all learning alongside you, and you're learning alongside us.
Yeah, I do feel like I'm relearning it every single time I teach everything. I'm sort of like going through that process of putting all the ducks in a row again, you know, getting everything straightened out. Yeah. And
then what has been your favorite class to teach?
Can I have several?
Yes.
So I've had several. Yeah, so I'm not sure I could pick one, but I can tell you several experiences and why they were interesting, right? So I taught Calc 3 every semester for like 20 years. And the material's fine, but it got to the point where I knew it so well that I didn't need to prep. And that had a real appeal to it. It felt so natural. I was like, I'm going to go teach blah, 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 and I just walk in a room and do it. And so I really enjoyed that. Right? So that's one aspect. That's one reason I really like that class. But then, for example, I helped design and teach an honor seminar once in the ethics of Breaking Bad, the TV show.
Oh,
and
that was not something I expected.
Yeah, the whole class was just like, it was like we had seven or eight professors who were helping with this, and we all picked a couple of topics related to the show. And so I picked, like, I gave a lecture on money laundering, and I gave a lecture on like the religious approaches to the character behavior in Breaking Bad. And, you know, and so part of it, like, I had the students come up with different ways to launder money. Things like this. And so it was so fun. It was so much fun to step out of my own comfort zone and be like, oh, how are we going to do this? And so that was fun.
So kind of going off that, this is a very ambiguous question, but if you could create any class, your own class, what would you teach it about?
I've always wanted to teach a class in like random shit that I thought of on the way to class. and that sounds kind of funny, but like I feel like I have a lot of things that I think about all the time, and they intersect with math, and they intersect with computer science, and they may be philosophy or religion or like climbing or like anything. And it would be kind of fun to be like, okay, what was I thinking about today? How, you know, not just like random, like go in there and like talk crap for an hour, but like how can I formulate this into something interesting that's coherent over the course of the semester?
If it was today's lecture, what would you talk about?
What would it be today?
Yeah.
Oh shit, now I'm on the spot. Maybe the first thing that comes to mind, right? So I used to train in Aikido. I trained for a very long time, and then I stopped. But last night I went to an Aikido class for the first time in a while, and so I've been thinking a lot since then about motion and rotation and like flowing and things like that. And there's a lot of deep philosophical things in there, along with mathematical things. And I think it'd be fun to like put together something based upon that. Like, oh, I had this experience, and I'm going to break it down in a way that's relevant to my audience, you know, and that would be kind of cool.
Like, so you talk about like philosophy. Is that like a big part of your life? Do you like, you know, enjoy that as a topic?
Yeah, I don't think that I wouldn't call myself a philosopher, nor would I say that I'm particularly well versed in philosophies or philosopher. Philosophies or philosophers. Like, if you were like, what was Kant? No, you know, I'd be like, well, reason, I don't know, something. But I think that I do tend to, for better or worse, I do tend to go off into my own head a lot and philosophize about things, about the nature of existence, and, you know, like these types of things. So I would say that's a big part of who I am and what I do in my spare time, so to speak.
So what is the first thing that comes to mind when I ask you, what is your favorite student story or something that's super memorable to you?
So I was teaching a summer class once, and it was a Calc 3 or something, I don't forget. And I had the student in there. He was clearly very smart, but he was clearly struggling. And he came to my office one day, and we were talking, and I said, yeah, what's going on? He's like, I don't really want to be here. I was like, well, why not? And he goes, I'm here because my parents want me to be here. I said, he was a slightly older student, probably in his mid-20s. He said, I really just want to open a bar. And I was like, well, you should go and open a bar. And he goes, are you telling me to quit school? And I was like, I'm telling you to follow your dreams. And he goes, huh. And then I never saw him again. And then he vanished. He dropped the class.
Like, and the next day, he just wasn't in class.
He just wasn't in class.
Oh.
And then like 5 years later, he wrote me an email. And he's like, I just wanted to check in. He's like, I dropped out of school. I opened a bar. He was like, my parents are pissed, but I'm happy. And I was like, yeah, that's it, right? Like, and you know, in some sense, I feel like that's something a teacher shouldn't do. I should be like, you should persevere with your Calculus 3. But this kid's like, fuck that. I don't want to do Calculus 3. Like, I want to open a bar. I'm like, cool, do it. Like, you know. So yeah, that sort of that's always stuck in my head as like a, within reason, follow your dreams, right? Like, if your dreams are to move to Alaska and live off rice, don't do that. But if your dreams are to like open a bar and you have some notion of what you're doing, like, hell, go do it. Like, of course.
Wow, that's like actually really inspiring. Like, school might not be for everyone, but
I don't think school is for everybody, right? Like, I think I was thinking about this actually for some reason earlier today. Like, I think that everybody can do it, right? Like, everybody at Maryland, like anybody at Maryland could finish a degree in anything at Maryland. Right? By the fact that all the students got into this school means that you're absolutely smart enough to do it, right? The question is, do you want to, right? Are you interested enough to pursue that degree? And maybe the answer is no. Like, you know, I know several people who got degrees in things that like they didn't end up doing at all, like totally unrelated. So it's like, did the degree help them? Like, well, maybe, but they probably could have ended up where they are without the degree. So maybe the degree's not it. Maybe it's not for them.
If you didn't get your undergrad and then go to grad school at Maryland, where would you be now?
So my father was a gunsmith.
Oh, wow.
And this is gonna sound slightly obnoxious, but it's about him, and so I mean it seriously. I say was because he's no longer with. He was one of sort of the 10 or so best gunsmiths in the world.
Wow.
And so people would send, like, so he worked with like very expensive shotguns, hunting guns, etc. And people would send things to him from all over the world. He never went to college. One of the smartest people I knew, like real hands-on. You know, I'd be like, I need this. He'd be like, let's just build a tool. I'd be like, okay. And I'd be like, how did you do? You know, and so there's a part of me that's really fascinated by those hands-on things, right? So like, I built a patio in my backyard, right? Like, I had to build a retaining wall, I had to level everything, I had to order everything and do it all by myself, and I love that, right? Like, I like fixing motorcycles, for example, like, and so like some kind of hands-on career, right? Like, if somebody said to me like, oh, tomorrow you don't get to teach anymore, you get to be a plumber, I'd be like, okay, that actually sounds kind of cool. Like, plumbers make good freaking money, you know? And it's like, it's never going to be replaced by AI, right? It would be like, you know, I'd be like, cool, I can do that. Or an electrician, or like those kinds of things. Like, that seems really fun.
So what would be the biggest thing that your students have taught you in your years of teaching?
To some degree, like humility. Like, I used to always think like, oh, I must be pretty smart because now I'm at the point where I'm like, I'm not sure that I'm that smart, and I have lots of students who are clearly smarter than me. And that's nice, right? Like, at one point in my life that probably bothered me, you know. I'm just like, the teacher, I'm supposed to know. But then I'm sort of like, no, that's great. Like, if none of my students, if no student was ever smarter than the teacher, think about the progress that would be in humanity. It would be like this downward, it's like, no, we don't want that. We want it like going up. And so, yeah, there's like that. Yeah. And also I think like just an appreciation for people. It's like I did a calculation the other day and I realized I've had like 50,000 students in my life or something like that. And I'm like, wow, like 50,000 individuals that I've been responsible for and that I've interacted with. And that's cool. Like that, to have that personal experience of like interesting people, diversity, etc. It's like, it's amazing. It's a blessing. Like, yeah.
It'd be kind of fun to get like a day in the life of you. So
yeah,
you wake up, like what does your morning routine look like?
So it's pretty regular. So yeah, I get up at like 6 generally. So what's actually funny is I used to be a morning person, and like I used to wake up at 5 and like leap out of bed. And for some reason in the last year I stopped really being a morning person. So now my alarm goes off at 6, or I still wake up before my alarm, but then I'm like, so. But it's pretty regular. So I get up and I walk in. I guess sort of step through, and I walk from my bedroom to the office in my house, and I have a 20-minute yoga routine that I do every single morning, and I have for like 3 years. Pretty much like 6 days a week, let's say. There's always a day that I'm like, staying in bed. And then after that, lately I've been doing 25 minutes on a stationary bike.
All in the morning?
Yeah, all in the morning. And then I make a smoothie. I have a regular thing that I make every morning. And then I'll engage with like morning emails and stuff, but not till then. And so like this semester, as an attempt to establish a better work-life balance, I have removed all my work emails from my phone, for example. So which means like when I wake up in the morning and look at my phone, there's like nothing that I have to worry about. I'm like, okay. So it's only after I make my smoothie that I'm like, okay, I'm gonna sit down at the computer and I'll be like, oh, what's going on? 43 emails. And so I'll like do a little bit of reply to anything urgent, and then I'll come into campus and teach my classes. If I have office hours, do that. And then the rest of the day really depends. So like a couple days a week, I'll go home and play PlayStation with my so like I have a fairly extended family in England. I have a younger brother in England. I have cousins, uncle, aunt, etc. So there's a group of about 5 or 6 of us that are regularly play PlayStation together, which is great because it's like kept me close to my family in England.
Yeah.
And so we'll do that, and then I'll maybe go to the climbing gym, for example. Yeah, and that's like a standard day in the life of me. Yeah.
I was just curious, like, so starting out like with the yoga, is that like for mindfulness or is it for exercise or both?
It was for back pain.
Oh, okay.
Originally. Yeah, I was having like regular back pain, and I was like, what should I do? And so I like looked up some yoga routines for lower back pain, and I started doing it, and it cured all my lower back pain. And I was like, I should keep doing this because this feels good. But now, there's a certain level of mindfulness that comes in, and a certain level of like, oh, this is how my morning goes. This is sort of like, it's a mental wake-up routine. And like a focusing and a calming, because I sometimes do tend to, like, it's funny, I know people who can't fall asleep because they lie in bed and their minds are like, like, and that's not me. Right? I go to bed and I'm asleep within 20 seconds. Like, it's not like, that's serious every night. Doesn't matter. I'm like, sleep, done. But when I wake up in the morning, my mind is like, boom. As soon as I wake up, I'm like, I'm thinking about this. And so the yoga helps me sort of like calm down and be like, okay, now I can go deal with the emails, and I can, I'm in a good place. I'm in a happy place. Yeah.
Also, what's the smoothie looking like?
I was just gonna ask that. The smoothie ingredients.
Oh, the smoothie ingredients.
Yeah, drop the recipe.
Yeah, I can tell you the recipe. So, because I do this every single day, right? So, a banana, frozen blueberries, frozen kale, milk, turmeric, bee pollen, maca root, matcha.
I love matcha.
And I think that's peanut butter and whole milk Greek yogurt.
Oh yeah, one last thing was like, what games are we talking?
I was gonna ask the exact same
Warzone.
Warzone.
Yeah,
oh, wow, okay.
That's the one.
The only.
Yeah, that's the only one. Yeah, it's regular. We all like it. Some stress relief. Yeah.
Nice.
Wow. Yeah. Sounds very fun.
If you could change anything about the lower level curriculum with the CS, what would you change and why? And we asked Nelson this. It was a very interesting question.
I remember his response. I remember his response.
We're going to recycle this question. So give us your thoughts. Give us your thoughts.
So it's actually tricky, right? And this is actually a tricky thing in CS. So I'll answer your question, but I'm going to take a while to get to it. Or I may not answer it, but I'm going to like orbit it somewhat and then try and implicitly answer it. So I think that the CS department not struggles, but I think there's an inherent struggle in teaching computer science about the difference between computer science and computer programming. Right, so like computer science is the mathematical study of computers. Full stop, right? There's no programming in that statement, right? And so, like getting a computer science degree, in theory, should mean that you can do math associated with computers, but it doesn't mean you know how to code. Whereas computer programming is like, do you have a practical skill set, right? I think that maybe this is the answer to the question. It would be beneficial for the lower level courses to make that distinction clear. And also, because I don't think that the CS department should simply say, this is computer science, not our problem to teach you how to code, right? I don't think that's the right approach either. And so I think that maybe finding a better balance of those two things so the students can come in and both learn how to code effectively, but also know that they're learning something more than just that. And so they should emerge from that lower level courses being like, oh, now I know what it means. Now I know what a computer science degree means at Maryland, and I understand that I'm getting it, and I understand why. Because that way when they get to the upper level courses, they're not being like, why are we learning this stupid math stuff? Because I mean, like a course like 420, right, which is data structures, right? I could teach that course and I could just go in, I could teach how these data structures work and we could code them. And at the end you know them and you know how to code them. And that's great if all you're ever going to do is code them. But suppose you go into industry and you're like, oh, I'm going to work for a company and we're building a new database. And we're trying to figure out how to best work with this database. And we need you to come up with some data structures, build them yourself, not like take some prepackaged ones, and figure out some new data structures that can handle the data that we're dealing with. And the only way that you can do that intelligently is to know why the ones that exist and their properties and how you prove those properties. And so going in and be like, oh, I need to develop something new. Now I can do it. I can analyze it, right? And I can justify it to a client, for example, or to my boss or to the team leader or whatever. And I think that's the thing. That's the thing that you want to come out of it understanding that that's relevant. Yeah.
I actually never thought about it like that. Like I came into CS thinking it was just like coding. Yeah. And then when I took 250 and 351, I was like, this is just math. And I was like, I did not sign up for this, but I guess I did.
Yeah, you did. And I think also like so this is a reason why the CS department doesn't want to get too obsessed with coding, right? Is that, at least as I interpret it, or if you told me I had to build a CS curriculum from the ground up, why I would be really, really cautious, is that it changes so fast in the industry. And the people who teach in the CS department don't know a lot of it because they're in the CS department. They're not in industry.
So like I feel like a lot of CS students feel like they're stuck in like software development and there's nowhere else to go because they have a CS degree.
If you think that you're stuck, you will be stuck. Full stop. But if you realize, like, if you really take a good look at your skill set and what you actually know and what you know, like you said, how to learn, that then like the doors go wide open and you're like, oh no, I know a hell of a lot more than I thought that I know, and I can do it. I can do it. Let me hurl myself into it. Yeah,
that connects to so many other things in life.
Oh no, it does, exactly. Yeah, I was thinking that as I said that. I was like, whoa, there are so many analogies there.
Yeah. Okay, fun question. Okay, classic one. Why is your UMD directory ID Immortal?
Oh yeah, the old question. Yeah, right. So I'll try. Every time I tell the story, I try and abbreviate it because it can go on a bit. But back when I was a grad student, there was no UID. Right? There was no UID. There was no director ID. Like everybody was ID'd by their social security numbers, which sounds like hilariously terrible. But it's There's a funny story connected to that too, which I can tell you too. But so all the departments had their own systems. Right, you had a user ID on the system. Blah, blah, blah. My math user ID was JOW. Boring. And I wanted to get an account on an engineering system because they had the best computers. And so, but I wasn't an engineering grad student. But my girlfriend at the time was friends with a system administrator in CS, so she's like, I'll hook you up. So she goes over and she asks him, like, yeah, can you set up an account for my boyfriend? And he's like, yeah, what do you want the account name to be? And she's like, Immortal, right? Like fit of romantic furor. And so he's like, whatever, done. And so it was like this nothing email address, this nothing account name for so many years until the university started to sort of glob the systems together. And if I remember it correctly, it was the engineering team that was responsible for building things out because they had the most experience or something. And then when they created the directory ID, they sent me an email one day and they're like, here's the thing, like, we could probably make it JOW, but it would be easier to keep it as Immortal, but that might be weird. What do you think? And I was like, no, of course it's not weird. Of course I want it. And so, so that's how it came to be.
Yeah. It's like iconic at this point.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And I'm still friends with her, and every now and then I mention it. She's like, hee. My responsibility.
Okay. Would you say you're like an impulsive spender, kind of? Like you see something when you're scrolling and you're just like, this looks interesting.
Yeah, I'm trying to get better at it. But yes, I'm a little bit impulsive. Yeah. But like the last like big impulsive purchase I bought like an Oculus Quest 3 headset, right? I was like, I kind of want to play with this, right? And I play with it far less than I thought I would. But I still play with it, you know, and it's kind of fun. I'm like, okay, this is kind of cool. Like, this is neat.
You mentioned the Oculus. When you think about like augmented reality, where it's headed, or like that space in general, and do you think we'll all eventually turn into, the Wall-E, like,
Yeah.
we're all sitting down.
Yeah, I remember watching that movie, and at the beginning I was like, oh, this is where we're headed. I can see it in the future. Yeah, I mean, I think augmented reality is a great tool. I think the idea that we might, I mean, like, none of the headsets are at the point now where you'd want to wear them 24/7, right? But I can certainly picture a point where, like, they're like built into your glasses. And like that, and the idea of people wearing them all the time seems pretty terrifying.
Right.
You know, it's. I think I was reading an article about this the other day. And the author, I don't remember who it was or which, whether it was the New York Times or the Washington Post, was talking about the issue of like the fact that we already live in our own bubbles. Right, like our news feeds, our social media feeds are catered to the things that we like. Right, they're all catered to like get a rise out of us and get us hooked on things that we find interesting. And I can't imagine if like augmented reality was like that. Right, it's like oh, I don't like you, so I'm going to program my glasses so that whenever you're nearby, it like gives you an ugly face or something. Right, because like he. Right, and like, and so it's kind of funny, right? In some sense, it's like having a filter on Instagram that does something. But the reality, it's much more disturbing than that. If you think about where that ends,
right?
Like, I think we as human beings should see lots of uncomfortable things all the time, and augmented reality worries me like that. But like, sure, give it to a surgeon, right, who needs like access to information or something like that, like 100%, like keep it, but just tread carefully. Yeah.
See, who do you think of when you hear the word successful?
What's your definition of success? I guess that kind of that's part of it.
I'm gonna take the what it isn't approach and like dig in. I don't think it's money. I don't think it's fame. I don't think it's any of those things, right? I know lots of people who make lots of money and they're desperately unhappy. And so that's not right. I know people who are in jobs that if I went to the average CS student and I said, would you like that job? They'd be like, hell yeah. But then that person is deeply unhappy because like the job isn't delivering something or they don't get enough vacation time or whatever the case may be. So I don't think it's any of those things. I think it's maybe this is it. You want to make enough money to do that. You want to make enough money and have enough time to do the things that you really want to do. That could include work, right? I don't think that you have to hate work and so on and so forth. I think that if you have a job that you enjoy, that's a plus.
Okay, so also a lot of options for this one, but if you could time travel anywhere, where would you go and like why?
So my tentative question is I would pick up point really far in the future. My worry is that like we won't exist as a species, right? Because I do worry about that. And so like a part of me would be like, yeah, like 1,000 years in the future, right? And so I suppose if I could come back, I could, like I could go there and be like, wow, we really like messed some shit up here. Like, okay, take me back, right? Or maybe I could figure out what we messed up or something like that. But I think that's tempting because like the exponential change of things, like 1,000 years is like so. Assuming we don't kill ourselves off as a species, there will be so many changes that will be fascinating. So I would probably go with that. Yeah.
But if you had a giant billboard, metaphorically, that would reach millions or billions of people, what would you put on that billboard? Breathe. Simple. You had an answer lined up for that. You want to explain?
Have you thought about this?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it's not something I've just thought about. It's something that I've engaged in. I won't go too into detail, but in the past, 6 months, say, for personal reasons, like due to personal issues is maybe the wrong word, but maybe it's the honest word, I've started to appreciate how much we struggle to think about things and focus and so on, and like how easy it is to get carried away and panic and so on and so forth. And like underlying all of that is sort of like calming our brains down to think clearly, and underlying that is breathing. And then when you're in a good place, then you can look at things realistically, pragmatically, and accurately, maybe. Yeah. So
is there like something that you specifically like to do to like get yourself to that state?
Breathe.
Okay.
Breathe. Like not just as an exercise that you do, like, oh, I'm going to do my breathing exercises now, but something that you're attentive to all the time. And so that's something that I'm like currently actively working on, not just like at this point in my life, but like here in this room. Like, when do I breathe? When do I, how do I put myself into a state that I can engage in a good way? And it all goes, for me, it all goes back to that of like,
I do notice that you always seem to have coffee in your hand, especially before lectures. What is the coffee order?
Well, so I used to be addicted to coffee, and like in the sense that when I tried to quit, I would get headaches, and so I did actually quit. Like, when was it? It was like a year and a half ago, maybe. Yeah, and I went through like days of headaches, and then the headaches went away. But now I'm drinking coffee again because it tastes so good. Like that's just the part. I just get like a regular coffee with cream and sugar. That's it. I love a latte or a cappuccino. Like all these things are great, but that's not what I'll typically buy. I'll just be like coffee, milk, and sugar, and like I just like it. It's like it tastes so good. The sweetness and
And then something else I've noticed in lecture is that you always wear short sleeves and shorts.
Yeah, I'm wearing my shorts now.
And I was wondering, do you not get cold? Like it's the middle of winter.
No, because I'm not outside that much.
I guess that makes sense.
Right? Like, so the funny thing is, like, I don't like the cold. But I don't, and so if you told me I had to go like walking in the cold for hours, I'd be like, I'm not going to wear shorts. That's it.
Yeah.
But I like the cold for short amounts of time. So as a general statement, I like discomfort in small doses. I think that's good. I think it's good for us. Right? And so so partly like that's the shorts. It's like, I'm gonna walk from my car and it's not gonna be comfortable, but I kind of like that discomfort. Yeah.
I was just gonna ask, like, going off the discomfort thing, what are other ways that you try and like introduce like small bits of discomfort in your life?
So like when I'm exercising, I always try to find ways to make the exercises less comfortable, right? So for example, like, right, and I had a martial arts teacher that was very into this, and so it'd be like, okay, we're gonna do planks, but we're gonna do them on brick, and you're gonna use your fists.
Ouch.
Right, and that's it, right? And so it like adds this extra touch, right, of discomfort. But as a result of like, I can hold a plank for 5 minutes on my fists on brick. It's no big deal. It's like, it's fine. But like that kind of thing. Like do things that take you like close, right? So so there's this philosophical idea of how we can break our experiences into like comfort and chaos. And you don't want to be too comfortable.
Right.
But you don't want to be too chaotic. And so the idea is to like live somewhere close to this middle line, but like dip your toe into discomfort and chaos once in a while.
I was gonna ask if like that goes back into the idea of like practicality and like being able to say I can do this thing, and like that can-do mindset of if you put yourself in discomfort a lot, you're kind of more actively showing yourself that you can do these little things.
100%. Yeah, and then it's easier to just throw yourself into it.
What is one genre of music or musical artist that you like listening to?
That was a popular one.
Oh, I don't know that I have a genre. This is gonna be a sweeping generalization because it's not always true, but the music that I tend to listen to tends to be music without voice. But not like classical music. Like I tend to like instrumental things. Like I've been listening to a lot of Moby lately. A lot of his latest stuff. I don't know if you know who Moby is. So Moby was huge in the rave scene back in the 90s. He was like one of the principal DJs. And then since then he's sort of gone into a lot of acoustic stuff, experimental stuff, and I like that, right? Because when I get very attached to music and I get very attached to vocals. And so if I'm trying to work, for example, like I can't have vocals on. Like I'll go off into a space where I'll be like, I'm listening to what the singer is saying, and I'm thinking about it, and I can't focus now. So I tend to like things without vocals, like that.
Does music play like a big role in your life? Like for me, like it does.
It's a role I have to be cautious with because I even without vocals, I get very emotionally attached to music, and so if I'm in a bad state of mind, I can play music and know that it's gonna put me in a good state of mind. And also, so for example, like I listen to music at night when I sleep, all night. So I have a playlist. It's like 8 hours long, and like I put it on like 20 minutes before I go to bed. Right, the first track is actually 21 minutes and 21 seconds long, and so and then it plays all night. You know, and I like it. I like waking up at night and hearing like the music that I'm familiar with. It sort of puts me into a really good mindset.
This is kind of a tangent, but I have a funny story relating to you and Bitcamp. So it was my first Bitcamp. I was an organizer, and I had a Calc 3 exam on Monday after Bitcamp, and I was like, okay, that's fine. We'll study during, Bitcamp. Did not happen that much. So I get back like after 32 hours of no sleep. I go to my friend's like dorm in Centerville, and I'm just like sitting there like 32 hours no sleep, and I ended up like doing shifts of like 3 hours like studying, like 1 hour sleeping to like lock it in, and then doing that until the exam. And it was Calc 3, so and I got like a 70%, but I'll take that.
You were like, I'm happy.
I was happy with that. But I was gonna say, like, relating to the music thing, like whenever I'm studying, I like listening to the same song on repeat, and then that way when I'm like taking the exam, I'll think about the song, and it just everything comes back. I don't have photoback like memory, like visually it's harder for me, but like music is very easy for me to.
So this is something you may have heard this before. I don't know if I read this. I may have heard this on a Tim Ferriss podcast actually. But apparently I was reading something that it was not that I'm going to consider myself in the category of highly successful, but the list was a list of like 5 or 10 things that people who are highly successful, whatever that means, do. One of them was playing the same song on repeat for hours. And I do that too. Like I will literally the same song. I'll do like that can go for 4 hours when I'm studying, etc. And so, I always thought it was weird until I read that, and I was like, well, like I said, I'm not going to say I'm highly successful, but I know I'm not crazy. If like all these other people are doing it too, I'm like, okay, great, I feel better about it now. That's cool. So you can feel better about it now.
I do feel better about it now.
I guess kind of we can wrap it up, but I just wanted to ask you for some advice for our Bitcamp attendees, if you have any. I'm not sure if you're familiar with hackathons or not, but Bitcamp is our 36-hour hackathon, and people just come in Friday afternoon and they start making a project, and then they submit it at Sunday afternoon at our expo, which they can present and show their projects and get them judged for prizes. So if you've ever had experience like coding short term or like coding something up in very small, limited amount of time, do you have any advice for our students that are doing that?
I mean, I think the answer to that question is related to the answer to the question about Bitcamp and the hackathon. Is I think that like the key is to pick things that you are interested in doing. And so whenever I need to learn other than like the consulting jobs that I've done, whenever I needed to learn something new, and I was like, I want to learn how to code in whatever language with whatever framework. What I'll do is I'll be like, okay, well, what can I do that's interesting to me? Like, because if it's not interesting to me, I will never follow through.
Of course.
And then when you're looking for jobs, you can be like, look, I did all these things. And they'll be like, well, why did you do those? And you're like, because I thought they were cool. And like,
It's easier to talk about too.
It's easy to talk about, yeah. And like that's a big plus when you be like, oh, I did these things for fun, right? Like somebody, if I were hiring you and you're like, I have all these projects I did for fun, and somebody else is like, I have all these projects I did because my classes told me to do them, I'd be like, you're hired. Like maybe you're smart, the other person, but like wow, that's cool. Yeah.
And that's what Bitcamp is. It's a learning experience. It puts you in discomfort. Which is,
it does.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Stress.
Physical discomfort.
Physical discomfort.
Lack of sleep.
Lack of sleep, everything. But yeah, when you come out of it, it's a learning experience. You'll be like, wow, I did something cool.
Yeah.
And I think that's really the charm of Bitcamp. So I think that's pretty much all we have for you today, Justin.
Cool.
Thank you so much
for
coming
Very
on.
welcome. That was so much fun.
I'm glad you had
great.
fun. I
Okay,
had so
cool.
much fun
Yeah.
too.
Yeah. Cool.